Hi.
Hi.
Welcome back to session 41, y'all. We're excited. We're here.
Let's get going.
Let's dive in.
We talked in the last two sessions about Bardo. First, we talked about the Devachan, which is the latter part of Bardo. In our last session, finally, we talked about the Kamaloka, that period that we go into not entirely immediately, but very soon after the physical body dies. We're close to the end of this letter, but we're finished with the discussion of doctrine, and the rest of it is kind of on other matters. But the following letters, couple of letters, are actually going to also be about Devachan, because the Englishmen both decided to write articles about it, and they've got questions.
Of course they do.
Before we get into that, I want to read one more quote from our little book, Practical Occultism by H.P. Blavatsky. It's actually two articles that were published in her magazine, Lucifer, the Lightbringer. But this is specifically for aspiring chelas, how you have to live your life, the things that you have to develop, the things you have to give up, and how you can make progress if that's your choice. In this one, she talks about how to control thoughts, how to gain complete control over your thoughts. And of course, it's a very, very long process, way more than one lifetime. We're going to go into this more in a future session, but I just want to point out a couple of things that do pertain to what we're discussing today. First, she talks about how you have to focus and be aware of everything you think. Pull back from the outer world. Live within your own aura, your own atmosphere, your own thoughts, and be extremely cognizant of everything that affects your thoughts, emotions, and ultimately your actions. She says the springing up of evil thoughts is less injurious than that of idle and indifferent ones, because
Wow, that's interesting.
as to evil thoughts, you are always on your guard, and having determined to fight and conquer them, this determination helps to develop the willpower. Indifferent thoughts, however, serve merely to distract the attention and waste energy. Think of all the things that I do, and maybe you do also, that are just a complete waste of energy all day long.
And many of those things really aren't even of our own decisions. It's outside influences, things that we see, billboards, ideas that may seem to be yours, but they may be other people's ideas that attach to you.
And the more time you spend on the computer or watching TV, the more you're exposed to these ideas and thoughts of other people. She also says, after your first efforts, you will begin to feel an indescribable vacuum and blankness in your heart. And that is true, because you're giving up a lot of what you used to be very much attached to. So the first reaction is going to be emptiness, and that's a good thing. Even Eckhart Tolle talks about that.
He does say that, yeah.
Fear not, but regard this as the soft twilight heralding the rise of the sun of spiritual bliss.
Wow.
Sadness is not an evil. We talk about getting rid of your bad emotions. Sadness is not one of them. Grief, as far as one that includes anger, is something you want to get rid of. But simple sadness is actually often a gateway to higher understanding, higher awareness.
There's a section in our book that is called The Power of Sadness.
Yeah, exactly. Complain not. What seem to be sufferings and obstacles are often, in reality, the mysterious efforts of nature to help you in your work if you can manage them properly. Look upon all circumstances with the gratitude of a pupil. All complaint is a rebellion against the law of progress. That which is to be shunned is pain not yet come. The past cannot be changed or amended. That which belongs to the experiences of the present cannot and should not be shunned. But alike to be shunned are disturbing anticipations or fears of the future, and every act or impulse that may cause present or future pain to ourselves or others. Be very much aware of how your thoughts affect not only you, but other people around you. If they affect you, they automatically affect the people you are closest to. There's no way around that. So if you think it's okay to beat yourself up, it's not, because you're also inflicting that pain on other people. So if you have the need to berate yourself or belittle yourself, figure out what you have to do to get over that, because it's not helpful to you or anybody else around you. But keep in mind what she said about sadness, because that will come up here. A couple of things that I wanted to point out about our last session. We were talking about kamaloka, and I want to emphasize once more why it is that mediums do not talk to actual dead people. And remember, we talked about different cases. We talked about the normal lifespan where a person dies more or less at the time appointed at birth because of their karma. And we talked about unusual cases, people who die by suicide or by accident. And what we learned is that even if the person lives their natural full life term, they go into a state, the kamaloka, which is very similar to being asleep at night. And he's going to bring that out in this next section, that you wouldn't think of having a conversation with a loved one who is sleeping right next to you. You would disturb them, they wouldn't be able to respond coherently, and they need their rest. Why would you do the same with a dead relative? So they're not available. They're in a very long rest. That's why we say rest in peace. That's what it is for, to rest and to sort out all of the results of their karma from the previous lifetime. So they can't communicate even with that individual. Once they have gone into Devachan, then you definitely can't communicate with them, unless you happen to be a very highly advanced individual, and still there's no reason to. They're still living in a dream world, a very blissful dream world, so it's still a dream. There is simply no reason to contact or try to contact anyone on the other side. They're going to be talking about an article that was written by Eliphas Levi about death. Now, he had passed away in 1875, so about 7 years previously. But as we've seen, the Mahatmas pay a lot of attention to his writings and what he believed, because they're almost entirely in line with their own teachings. He had written an article about death, which was republished in the Theosophist, the previous October edition, October 1881. So we're going to be referring to that. And one thing that Eliphas Levi said was, he who has the keys to death has the keys to life. And the Mahatmas absolutely agreed with that.
That's interesting.
So
very interesting.
If you thoroughly understand the death process and the different stages after physical death, it gives you tremendous insight into our living process, because that's the cause of everything afterwards.
That's very, very important. Very important to know.
So with that said, let's go ahead and get started. We're still on letter number 68, and this is KH speaking to Sinnett, but it's again for both of the Englishmen. KH was reiterating a discussion that Hume had had with HPB in trying to determine what was meant by individuality as opposed to personality. So basically the higher self and the lower self, the personality as opposed to the ego, let's say.
He's referring to pratyeka yana and of amita yana. So different phraseology for higher self and lower self here.
Right, and that is Sanskrit.
Okay. Number one, pratyeka yana. In Sanskrit, pratyeka literally means the personal vehicle or personal ego, a combination of the 5 lower principles, while 2, amita yana. In Sanskrit, amita is translated the immortal vehicle or the individuality, the spiritual soul or the immortal monad, a combination of the 5th, 6th, and 7th.
In this, the personal ego would be the physical, the prana, the astral, and the lower part of the mental. That is the personality, the lower self. The higher self is the higher part of the mental, the buddhic, and the atma. We often speak of atma, buddhi, manas, but when we do that, we're only speaking about the 3 higher sublevels of the mental plane.
And then there's a question.
And I'm reading the question from Sinnett. It appears to me that one of our great difficulties in trying to understand the progress of affairs turns on our ignorance of the divisions of the 7 principles. Each has, in turn, its 7 elements, we are told. Can we be told something more concerning the 7-fold constitution of the 4th and 5th principles especially? Referring to the fact that every one of our principles has 7 sub-levels. It is evidently in the divisibility of these that the secret of the future and of many psychic phenomena reside here during life. And KH says,
Quite right, but I doubt if the desired explanations will remove the difficulty and enable you to solve the secret of psychic phenomena. You, my good friend, whom I once or twice had the pleasure of hearing playing your piano in the quiet intervals between dress coating and a beef and claret dinner, tell me, could you favor me as easily with one of Beethoven's grand sonatas as with one of your easy waltzes? Please, please have patience. Yet I would not refuse you by any means. And now, how long do you propose to abstain from interrogation marks? Faithfully, KH.
remember when Moria first started communicating with the Englishmen, he gave them the example saying, go to your pianoforte and play a diatonic scale on the lower register, but go down and then back up. So we found out that Sinnett did have a pianoforte, but this is the first and only reference that I've ever seen that he actually played the piano. And when he says your easy waltzes, I'm guessing that that probably means waltzes of Brahms and most likely Chopin, because those are some of the easier pieces, and even those are not real easy. But he says, could you favor me as easily with one of Beethoven's grand sonatas? And those are a lot more difficult. But apparently he at least attempted them. I don't know how well he played. There is no other indication than this that he actually played the piano. We do know that HPB was an excellent pianist and was taught by a great well-known teacher, Moscheles, in London when she was a teenager.
I wonder if Sinnett changed his behavior because he knows that he can be watched at any time.
Yes, he realizes that KH does watch him a lot.
And of course, they're nowhere physically near each other.
No, hundreds of miles away.
I wonder if he changed what he does.
He's going to ask something very interesting in one of these letters.
I'd like to ask a question about the chart that you made here. In theosophical tradition, in the Western tradition of the koshas, or the aspects or principles, as we're calling them, many different names, where we typically use a scheme of 7 of them, except we typically will break the mental into 2. Now, I know each principle has 7 subdivisions, but specifically the mental has 2 major subdivisions, and then perhaps each of those has 7. But why did you do the etheric double as a separate versus the mental as being 2?
Because that's how he divided it up in his explanation.
Okay.
Because he referred, remember, to the struggle that takes place at the physical death. These 3 principles disappear entirely soon after the physical body dies. Then we're left with 4. And the struggle after Kamaloka is between the astral and mental, and the Atmic and the Buddhic. So that's why he separated, and instead of talking about a lower quaternary and a higher triad, he's talking now of a lower triad and an upper quaternary. That's the only reason.
That does make sense. I'm just wondering if he specifically separates etheric double and prana, because to me those are the same thing.
No, they're not. Remember, prana is a form of foha. It's an energy. It's what makes the physical body alive.
Which contains the chakras and nadis. Prana.
Probably the etheric double, because that's the blueprint for the physical body. Prana is the energy, but it follows the etheric double, which is the blueprint for the physical body, as I understand it. Okay.
Now we have a long PS.
Oh, he signed it faithfully KH, but then he added a PS.
I hope I have now removed all cause for criticism and that my reputation is reestablished. You and Mr. Hume have now received more information about the philosophy than was ever given out to non-initiates, as far as I know. I hope they realize how special that is.
I hope so, too.
Your wisdom, my kind friend, will have suggested long ago that it is not so much because of your combined personal virtues, though Mr. Hume has run up a large claim since his conversion, or my personal preferences for either of you, as for other and very apparent reasons. Of all our semi-chelas, that's funny, you two are the most likely to use the facts given to you for the general good. Nice.
Yeah,
so they have other semi-chelas.
We've heard this before. If you want to get their attention, use everything that you have learned so far and share it with others.
Yes.
That's the only way that they're going to show any interest in you as an individual.
Right. In other words, if you're too focused on the phenomena to impress your friends, they're going to cut you off. And you see how borderline these guys are in asking for a phenomena, but they're still using the information for good. You must regard them as received in trust for the benefit of the whole society, to be pondered over, used, and reused in many ways and in all ways that are good. Well, he says society, but he really means the whole world, too.
Right, but they share it, first of all, with the Theosophical Society, and from there it goes out to the rest of the world.
If you, Mr. Sinnett, would give pleasure to your trans-Himalayan friend, do not let any month pass without writing a fragment, long or short, for the Theosophist magazine, and then issuing it as a pamphlet, as you call it. You may sign them as a lay chela of KH. Nice.
And I think this is the first time he told them, since you're not going to become real chelas, you can sign yourself as a lay chela.
Wow, okay. Or in any way you choose. I dare not ask the same favor of Mr. Hume, who has already done more than his share in another direction. Ooh, yikes.
Now remember, when he talks about Hume's conversion, it's because Hume got miffed months ago and wouldn't speak to them. And then only recently he kind of came around and showed interest again, but we'll see how long that lasts.
I will not answer your query about your pioneer connection just now.
This is interesting because this is going to be a major development. KH is going to become involved in a business proposition.
Something may be said on both sides, but at least take no rash decision. We are at the end of the cycle, and you are connected with the TS. Ooh.
Now, when he says the end of the cycle, it's the 7-year trial period coming up in November.
But they didn't start communicating at the beginning of the 7-year cycle with these guys.
No, it was in the fall of 1880.
It's been
almost 2 years.
2 years at this point. Okay. With regard to my karma, that's interesting because he's a Mahatma, and Mahatmas
they
usually don't have any more karma.
Only have, for the most part, good karma, except when they take on some of the karma of their chelas. When they start interacting intimately with particular individuals, there's no way that they don't take along with them some of their karma.
Also, isn't it true that if they take a physical body in any way, they can accumulate karma that way?
They can always, yeah.
With regard to my karma, I mean to answer Mr. Hume's long and kind personal letter tomorrow. The abundance of manuscripts from me lately shows that I have found a little free time. That's good. He's busy. However, their blotched, patchy, and mended appearance also proves that my free time has come in snatches, with constant interruptions, and that my writing has been done in odd places here and there, with such materials as I could find. Wow, so I want to know what his day looks like. Like, what is he doing? Like, I wonder what they're doing all day.
Oh, he's extremely busy because he's on the fast track to become a bodhisattva. Remember in the early days when they were able to do precipitations? That had been cut off at some point in the past. And so now he's either having to write his own letters or dictate them to a chela. These are being sent by mail. They started communicating 2 years earlier, and many of those early communications were precipitated.
Okay, so over the period of 2 years.
But the Mahatma Chohan apparently put an end to that and said, we're wasting too much energy. And so he restricted them to normal means of communicating.
Were it not for the rule that forbids our using one iota of power until every ordinary means has been tried and failed, I might have given you a lovely precipitation with regard to handwriting and composition. I console myself for the miserable appearance of my letters with the thought that perhaps you may not value them any the less despite the marks of my personal subjection to the side annoyances. As your lady once kindly remarked, they take away most effectively the flavor of miracle and make us like human beings, more believable entities, a wise reflection for which I thank her.
Yeah, he had a lot of regard for Mrs. Sinnett.
HPB is in despair. The Chohan refused Moria permission to let her come any further this year than the Black Rock, and Moria made her unpack her trunks. Try to console her if you can. Besides, she is really needed more at Bombay than Penlore.
I don't know where Black Rock or Penlore is, other than obviously North India near the Tibet border. She had been in poor health for so long that they were afraid of losing her. Moria had given her permission to come to visit them so that they could work on her. And then the Chohan said, no, that's not going to happen. So she was quite upset, and I can understand.
My goodness. Alcott is on his way to Sri Lanka, and Damodar packed up to Pune for a month. His foolish austerities and hard work having broken down his physical constitution. Is that Alcott or Damodar?
Damodar. No, Damodar, bless his heart, he was so intent on becoming an accepted chela of the Mahatma that he was working his tail off. He was doing a lot of the work on the Theosophist magazine at Bombay, and in addition doing his own practices to try to develop his skills as a chela, he overdoes things.
That's what KH is referring to as foolish austerities. Austerities are the disciplines or practices. Right. Didn't Subarao do something similar, but just way too...
Yeah, Subarao was similar, but they each had different approaches. Damodar is just laser focused. He is devoted to, first of all, KH, and secondly to HPB because she's the conduit. And he was working harder than he should have. He should have taken it a little more steady.
Like he may have been sitting in meditation for a little too long, doing too much breath work perhaps, or maybe not sleeping as much as he should have been perhaps, something like that.
So they ordered him to leave Bombay, get away from the work area, and spend some time recuperating in Pune.
KH says, I will have to look after him and perhaps to take him away if it comes to the worst.
Meaning bring him to Tibet.
Oh, wow. Just now, I am able to give you a bit of information which bears upon the often discussed question of our allowing phenomena. This is still all in his PS.
Yeah, exactly.
The Egyptian operations of your blessed countrymen involve such local consequences to the body of occultists still remaining there and to what they are guarding, that 2 of our adepts are already there, having joined some Druze brethren, and 3 more on their way. I was offered the privilege of becoming an eyewitness to the human butchery, but declined with thanks. What is he talking about? Our force is saved up for great emergencies like this, and hence we dare not waste it on unnecessary phenomena.
In 1882, there was a war building up between England and Egypt. And part of it had to do with the fact that the British owned a lot of interest in the Suez Canal. And they kind of used that as an excuse, that and other business interests that they had in Egypt, to create this diversion, a war, to gain more control over Egypt in general. And it ended up being a bloody war. We have a section of the Brotherhood in Luxor, or near Luxor. And so they obviously have objects, manuscripts, and who knows what else that are valuable treasures. And the Brotherhood in Tibet was sending some of their representatives to help out and do what they could to protect them. And KH was invited to go see, and he said he declined with thanks.
In about a week, new religious ceremonies, new glittering baubles to amuse the babies, and once more I will be busy night and day, morning, noon, and evening.
So remember, he is in charge of the Tibetan Buddhist ceremonies for special occasions. He obviously doesn't put as much stock in it as a lot of the other Tibetan lamas do, and he calls it glittering baubles to amuse the babies.
At times I feel a passing regret that the Chohans don't agree to give us, too, a sumptuary allowance in the shape of a little spare time.
And remember, the sumptuary allowance was Sinnett's expense account provided by the newspaper so he could, hobnob with the rich and famous in India.
And KH is asking for some sumptuary allowance in the form of spare time.
Yeah, a little time off. Maybe we could get an allowance in the form of some time off.
Oh, for the final rest. Oh, he's even wanting the final rest.
Yeah.
Really?
Oh, he works very, very hard.
For that nirvana where to be one with life, yet to live not. Alas, alas. Having personally realized that the soul of things is sweet, the heart of being is celestial rest. One does long for eternal rest.
I tried to find that poem or citation, but I couldn't find anything, so I know.
Yours, KH.
I have no idea where it came from.
It's interesting to hear him longing for that. We have tons of friends in the spiritual world who are like, I can't wait for moksha, to get out of this cycle of incarnation. I don't want to come back. And here he's saying that.
And we often think that, why wouldn't everyone come back? And the truth is that even those who are in nirvana are providing a benefit to all of humanity. They are in sublime meditation 24 hours a day in our time. And that influence is going out around the world. They do accomplish something positive for the rest of us. It's kind of selfish as far as I look at it, but on the other hand, humans are only going to progress at a certain rate. So it's probably not necessary for every nirvani to come back and try to help. I don't know. Well, that's what they're called, nirvani.
I like that.
Now we're on letter number 69, a short letter. Sinnett obviously didn't refrain from interrogations because he asked 2 more questions. And they're both working on articles, remember. So this is short and a succinct reply to Sinnett's 2 questions. We don't have the actual questions, but KH is going to tell basically what they were. Go ahead. This was received in Shimla, July 6th, 1882.
I am sincerely pleased, my pupil, that you should write to me. He's pleased even though he asked him to not interrogate him.
That was kind of a joke.
Okay. It is impossible under your present health conditions that you should bring back to your physical brain the consciousness of higher planes of existence. Yet remember that the sense of magnetic refreshment is no true measure of spiritual benefit, and you may even attain greater spiritual progress whilst your psychic development appears to stand still. Now, what's his current health condition?
I'm not sure. I have never heard any explanation of any kind of health problems that he had, so I'm not sure what that was. And then the other thing he says, remember that the sense of magnetic refreshment is no true measure of spiritual benefit. We all have dreams sometimes where you wake up and you were just in this blissful state. That's not necessarily any indication of anything special other than you created that. But he said sometimes you attain greater spiritual progress while your psychic development appears to stand still. Don't give up. Remember, their mantra is try, try, try. Never give up. Even if you don't see results, keep doing the practice. Here's the answer to his 2 questions.
Now to answer your questions. 1. In esoteric teachings, Brahma, Pitri, and Deva lokas are states of consciousness belonging to the various ethereal hierarchies or classes of Dhyanis and Pitris, the creators and ancestors of humanity. Wow. And of Devas, some far higher than man spiritually, and some among the Deva classes far behind on the descending arc of evolution, and only destined to reach the human stage in a future manvantara.
In The Secret Doctrine, HPB often speaks of the lunar Pitris, and these are Dhyan Chohans, but of a lower class than the planetary spirits who are in charge of an entire planet. A lower form of Dhyan Chohan may be in charge of a particular realm in a world or a particular group of people. And we have no idea how many Dhyan Chohans there are associated with our little planet here. But just keep in mind that they are all at different levels of awareness or advancement.
This is very interesting that he's correlating Brahma to the Dhyanis.
Dhyan Chohan is basically the highest form of advancement, and there are many levels. Some say 12 different levels of Dhyan Chohan.
Right, and he says, there in quotes, the Dhyanis and Pitris are the creators and ancestors. So creator, in Hindu culture, Brahma is the God the Father, the creator.
Yes, exactly.
He's saying that.
So he's saying Brahma, the creator, and the Pitris, which are the ancestors, meaning they come in and inhabit physical bodies to set the stage and to get going a new race.
Very interesting that he's doing that. Exoterically, these lokas represent nirvana, Devachan, and the astral world. Now that's also very interesting. Wow, nirvana, so that would be the location or the consciousness of Brahma or the Dhyanis.
Mm-hmm.
Devachan would be the location or consciousness of the Pitris, and the astral world of the angels, the Devas. The meaning of the terms Devachan and Devaloka is identical. Chan and Loka equally signifying a place or abode. Deva is a word too indiscriminately used in Eastern writings and is at times merely a decoy. Question 2. You will be right in using the terms real knowledge and true cause of the verses quoted to refer to the highest plane of spiritual enlightenment, the greater darkness into which the perfected siddha is finally merged. Thereby is that absolute darkness, which is absolute light. Yeah, that's very confusing. The siddha is the yogi or the person who has acquired siddhis, special powers.
Right,
an advanced person.
Basically the one who is entitled to nirvana. But he's saying absolute light is the same as absolute darkness because there's nothing to differentiate. It's all light.
The real knowledge here spoken of is not a mental but a spiritual state, implying full union between the knower and the known. I hope that these brief replies may throw all the light you need upon these points.
Now, at the end of the question 1, or the response to question 1, he mentioned that deva is a word too indiscriminately used in Eastern writings and is at times merely a decoy. He used the word blind, but I don't think most people will know what a blind is. But it's something that obscures something or that prevents you from seeing what is actually there. And deva is used, as we said before, for anything between an elementary, a basic nature spirit, and the very highest Dhyan Chohan. So it's kind of a useless phrase in that sense, unless you specify which level you're speaking about.
Okay, letter 70, received at Shimla in August 1882.
The previous letter, 69, was received July 6th, fairly early in the month, and now we're in August. Now we have a series of 3 letters labeled 70A, B, and C because they all pertain to the same topic. The 2 Englishmen, as I said, were both working on articles regarding Devachan, and they realized that they had received a lot of really succinct information about Bardo. And now, of course, they wanted to share that with the rest of the world. But they both knew that the spiritualists were going to be very upset with this information. It didn't portray them in a good light at all, and both of them were very concerned about that. Hume especially really didn't want to. So we're going to hear from him first. He wrote a letter directly to KH, and it was, I assume, sent through HPB or through the mail. I don't know how it was received, but he is importuning him and, again, wanting to debate him, trying to convince him that he must be wrong. Let me convince you. I can convince you of the facts, and I'm sure you will see it my way. So I'm going to read the letter from A.O. Hume.
We do have a copy of the letter from Hume here. I wonder how we have a copy of that.
Because KH sent it to Sinnett. 70B is a letter that Sinnett wrote to HPB, because he was writing an article for the Theosophist and hoping to get more information before the next Theosophist came out. And so he wrote directly to HPB, and then she forwarded that to KH. So now KH has a letter from Hume and one from Sinnett. And so now he's returning both of them to Sinnett with the answers. And so I'm going to read the letter from Hume first, but we're going to intersperse in that the answers that KH wrote on the back of the letters. This is from A.O. Hume to KH. My dear Master, in speaking of fragments number 3, of which you will receive proofs soon, I said it was far from satisfactory, though I had done my best. It was necessary to advance the doctrine of the society another stage, so as gradually to open the eyes of the spiritualists. I introduced as the most pressing matter the suicide, etc. view given in your last letter to Sinnett. Well, it is this that seems to me most unsatisfactory, and it will lead to a number of questions that I shall feel puzzled to reply to. Our first doctrine is that the majority of objective phenomena were due to shells, 1.5 and 2.5 principled shells, i.e., principles entirely separated from their 6th and 7th principles. But as a further development, we admit that there are some spirits, i.e., 5th and 4th principles, not wholly dissevered from their 6th and 7th, which also may be potent in the seance room. These are the spirits of suicides and the victims of accident or violence. Here, the doctrine is that each particular wave of life must run on to its appointed shore and, with the exception of the very good, that all spirits prematurely divorced from the lower principles must remain on earth until the foredestined hour of what would have been the natural death strikes. Now, this is all very well, but this being so, it is clear that in opposition to our former doctrine, shells will be few and spirits many. He's saying these entities that the spiritualists are contacting are really people. They're not shells, or there are very few shells in comparison to the real people they're contacting.
So here's the answer. Although not wholly dissevered from their 6th and 7th principles and quite potent in the seance room, nevertheless, until the day they would have died a natural death, they are separated from the higher principles by a gulf. The 6th and 7th remain passive and negative, whereas in cases of accidental death, the higher and lower groups mutually attract each other. In cases of good and innocent egos, moreover, the latter gravitates irresistibly toward the 6th and 7th, and thus either slumbers surrounded by happy dreams or sleeps a dreamless, profound sleep until the hour strikes. With a little reflection and an eye to eternal justice and fitness of things, you will see why. Nice. The victim, whether good or bad, is not responsible for his death, even if his death was due to some action in a previous incarnation.
Ah, that's interesting.
So it's not an accident then. It's karma.
Yeah, I'm not sure. It's getting a little confused in my mind.
It was an act of the law of retribution, which is karma.
Yeah.
But it was not the direct result of an act deliberately committed by the personal ego of that life. Obviously, that's how it works.
Right.
During which he happened to be killed.
Yeah, I'm not sure that the logic follows here.
But he's describing regular karma, and this is what we teach all the time.
That's why it's a little confusing as to what is an accident and what is karma.
I'm going to guess that when he says accident, it's something that's like the building collapses because it was rotting.
Yeah, that's
an accident.
What I would say.
But that's not. That's karma. Let's
see if it becomes any clearer.
Okay. Had he been allowed to live longer, he might have atoned for his previous sins even more effectively. And when he says previous, keep in mind, it's probably past lives kind of things. And even now, the ego, having been made to pay off the debt of his maker, the previous ego, or many egos ago, I'm just adding my own commentary here, is free from the blows of retributive justice. The Dhyan Chohans, who have no hand in the guidance of the living human ego, protect the helpless victim when he is violently thrust out of his element into a new one before he is matured and made ready for it.
This is very interesting. There are Dhyan Chohans, or at least one, specifically assigned to watch out for those individuals, those souls that have died by an accident. And the reason being that it was no fault of theirs. It really shouldn't have happened, but because of how
Right.
people operate in this world, accidents do happen.
That's actually comforting.
It is.
And it makes sense that would be the case because they probably usher that soul through the process a little bit.
In
them
another
up too
letter,
much.
he's going to state very clearly that whatever they missed out on and whatever they suffered because of that will be made up to them. So there is the balance of justice.
Wow. I know what I'm telling you because we are made to learn it through personal experience. Oh my gosh.
So they have to investigate particular cases, and that's how they learn how it operates.
Well, I don't know. I'm sure they investigated, but personal experiences mean they have to live through it.
Well, maybe. I interpreted it as observing that, but maybe you're right, but that doesn't, that sounds a little strange.
If we're going to become an adept, we have to experience those kinds of deaths.
I guess.
To our viewers, once we become adepts, we will have probably gone through every kind of life and death there is. I mean, think about it. If we live 800 times, out of those 800 times, we're going to probably have a few accidental deaths.
And we're going to expand this a little bit, as you will see. So just keep that in mind.
You know what I mean, and I can say no more. Yes, the victims, whether good or bad, do sleep, awakening only at the hour of the last judgment, which is that hour of the supreme struggle between the 6th and 7th and the 5th and 4th at the threshold of the gestation state. And even after that, when the 6th and 7th, carrying off a portion of the 5th, have gone into their Akashic Samadhi, even then it may happen that the spiritual spoils from the 5th will prove too weak to be reborn in Devachan, in which case it will, at that time, reclothe itself in a new body, the subjective being created from the karma of the victim, or non-victim, as the case may be, and enter upon a new earth existence, whether upon this or any other planet. Why would it be a different planet, though?
I'm not sure.
Is he saying that they might not go to Devachan? This is foregoing Devachan because it was an accident. They were cut short.
Yeah, he said it may be that the struggle is such that there's no energy left. And we're talking about the resolution of energy here. Yeah. So maybe the energy is dissipated to such an extent that there is nothing left for a Devachan period.
In no case, then, with the exception of suicides and shells, is there any possibility for any others to be attracted to a seance room? It is clear that this teaching is not contrary to our former doctrine, and that while shells will be many, spirits will be very few.
Hume's not going to be happy, and neither are the spiritualists. What difference can there be, taking the case of suicides, whether these be conscious or unconscious, whether the man blows his brains out or only drinks or womanizes himself to death or kills himself by overstudy? In each case, the natural hour of death is hastened, and a spirit, not a shell, is the result. Or what difference does it make whether a man is hung for murder, killed in a battle, in a railway train, or a powder explosion, or drowned, or burnt to death, or knocked over by cholera, or plague, or jungle fever, or any of the other 1,001 epidemic diseases of which the seeds were not from the start in his constitution, but were introduced there in consequence of his happening to visit a particular locality or undergo a given experience, both of which he might have avoided. In all cases, the normal death hour is accelerated, and a spirit rather than a shell is the result.
According to my knowledge, that's not the case. It's karma. The reason that the person visited the location was because that's part of his destiny in that life to experience that.
But wait,
Let's
there's
see what he
more.
says.
In England, it is calculated that not 15% of the population reach their normal death period, and what with fevers and famines and their results, I fear the percentage is not much larger here even, where the people are mostly vegetarian and, as a rule, live under less favorable sanitary conditions. So then, the great bulk of all the physical phenomena of spiritualists ought, apparently, to be due to these spirits and not to shells. I should be glad to have further information on this point. He's showing his attitude here.
There is a great difference in our humble opinion. There are very few, if any, of the men who indulge in the above enumerated vices, who feel perfectly sure that such a course of action will lead them eventually to premature death, obviously, right? Such is the penalty of Maya. That's illusion or glamoury, glittery things. The vices will not escape their punishment, but it is the cause, not the effect, that will be punished, especially an unforeseen, though probable effect.
Unless they're purposely trying to kill themselves, it's the intent that creates your karma. If you do something that causes the body to wear out or to be unable to resist something, that's still a natural death in the occult world. That's not suicide.
Right. You might as well call a man who meets his death in a storm at sea a suicide as well as the one who kills himself with overstudy. Water is liable to drown a man, and too much brain work to produce a softening of the brain, which may carry him away. In such a case, no one ought to even take a bath for fear of fainting and being drowned, nor should a man do his duty, least of all sacrifice himself for even a laudable and highly beneficent cause, as many of us do, including HPB. Motive is everything, and man is punished in a case of direct responsibility. Never otherwise. I also want to say that we're using the word punishment a lot, and in our book, in our teachings, we like to say that karma is neutral. It's just a result of the action. If it feels like a punishment, it's because whatever we've been doing was commensurate with,
And
with the results.
He even sometimes refers to karma as the law of retributive justice.
Yeah, he did earlier, yeah.
So it all depends on your point of view. And they, I think, would agree with us that karma is not a respecter of person. It doesn't have any preference one way or the other. It is simply trying to get us back on the path in line with nature, nothing more.
In the victim's case, the natural hour of death was hastened accidentally, while in that of the suicide, death is brought on voluntarily and with a full and deliberate knowledge of its immediate consequences.
What he's pointing out, and did in the past too, without stating it exactly, is that we have no more right to destroy our own physical body than we do to destroy someone else's. This is a spiritual being here, and you're the steward of that. You have no right to kill that. So it's that simple. In fact, in the Catholic Church, suicide was always considered a great sin. In the past, they wouldn't even allow a person who committed suicide to be buried in a Catholic cemetery.
Therefore, a man who causes his death in a fit of temporary insanity is not a suicide, nor is he left a prey to the temptations of the kama loka, but falls asleep like any other victim. Wow. So a suicide death by an insane person, as long as they really are not conscious, they're
Yes,
it's not treated as a
if they are
suicide.
unable to make that informed decision, if their mental state is
Yeah.
such that they couldn't
Yeah.
be held responsible for the murder of another person,
They're still a victim themselves.
it's the same if they killed themselves. They didn't intend to do it. I mean, they just, in a fit of insanity.
Our penal system does recognize that.
It does.
It doesn't mirror this doctrine exactly, but we have different punishments in the court system, in the legal system for insanity.
We do.
versus
We have different levels:
Yeah.
first-degree murder, second-degree murder,
manslaughter.
manslaughter. It all depends on the
Right.
motive. And this is a good time to point out that our punitive laws, our criminal law, is meant to imitate nature's law. We do a pretty bad job of it sometimes.
Even lawyers and attorneys.
But that's basically what law is supposed to do, is to provide justice, to balance the scales of justice. But one thing that the law takes into account is retribution. They will often depend on what the family of a victim wants, especially in a murder, a vicious murder.
Do they?
Oh, yes. Whether or not they try a person for the death penalty will depend a lot on the family, whether or
Really?
not they want it.
Wow, I didn't know.
So, yes, they pay a lot of attention to what the family of the victim would like for an outcome. Karma doesn't do that.
A Gito will not remain in the Earth's atmosphere with his higher principles over him, inactive and paralyzed, but still there. He doesn't tell us what a Gito is.
Keep going.
Gito has gone into a state throughout which he will be continually firing at his president, thereby tossing into confusion and shuffling the destinies of millions of persons, and where he will over and over be tried and hung, bathing in the reflections of his deeds and thoughts, especially those he indulged in on the scaffold.
And here in the original letter, 2 lines were erased. I went online to actually look at them, and you can see it's 2 lines purposely smudged. They were written in ink, and yet by their osmosis, or their opposite osmosis, removed the ink to smudge it so it was illegible. Whether it was KH who did that or one of the other Chohans, I don't
Probably
know.
a higher up, right? His boss
Yeah,
is like, no, you're not going to say that.
somebody didn't want that to be written down.
Wow. His fate.
Yeah, there were 2 lines, and then all that was left of 1 line was his fate.
I think we need to talk about that last sentence there.
As far as which part?
So first of all,
Yes.
Gito,
Okay, so Charles Guiteau, as they say in English, but it was a French name, Guiteau. Charles Guiteau was kind of a fanatic, and he had just been hung in June of 1882 for the crime of assassinating the president of the U.S., James Garfield. This Charles Guiteau was upset because he hadn't been appointed an ambassador to Europe, because he had done some campaigning on behalf of President Garfield without his knowledge. And somehow in his mind, he decided that that entitled him to an ambassadorship. So he was kind of a strange character. So anyway, when he didn't get appointed as an ambassador, he decided he was going to take matters into his own hands, shot the president, and he died weeks later from his injuries. He was tried, found guilty, and then a year after the trial was hung. It's interesting to see here, obviously, they are not in favor of the death penalty, because he's going to point out a little bit more. You're cutting off that person's chance to make amends as much as possible within the same lifetime, to change his attitude. And so instead, what he's going to do is spend what would have been the remainder of his natural life revisiting everything that was the last thought that he died. And it was going to be anger and the fact that he was treated unjustly. So he's going to be replaying this scene forever, or for at least the remainder of what would have been his life. And there's no chance for him to make any progress. And it's going to set the stage for the next life, too. So that life may not be any better. So quite obviously, they are not in favor of the death penalty. We'll get more information in general about this.
Is he implying that this is an accident, though? He's not, right? This is karma, right?
Well, it's his karma, and yet he was murdered by the state as retribution for having killed the president. I don't know what he's referring to when he says that he will be continually firing at his president.
Oh, because he's going to relive that last bit over and over
That
again.
part, yes, but thereby tossing into confusion and shuffling the destinies of millions of persons. And I'm not quite sure what he means by that, unless it's just the negative energy that Guiteau is going to be sending out to the world for a long, long time.
It could also relate to the ramifications of assassinating a president of a millions of persons country.
Oh, that could be.
Somehow related to that.
That could be, but I wasn't certain on that.
As for those who were knocked over by cholera or plague or jungle fever, they could not have succumbed if they didn't have the germs for the development of such diseases in them.
So, if you're born with a weak constitution, an inability to fight off certain diseases, then if you die from one of those diseases, it's not suicide, it's your natural life.
Right.
And we said before that when you're born, there is a variable length of time. Let's say you're supposed to live 82 years. And if you take care of yourself and eat well and exercise, and you live 89 years, that's still a natural life. If you smoke and drink and never exercise and you only live 68 years, it's still a natural life. It's your intention that is important, not whether you died because you didn't do everything you could have to live out that full length of life.
He's quoting another question. So then, the great bulk of the physical phenomena of spiritualists, my dear brother, are not due to these spirits, but indeed are due to shells.
Again, he's refuting what A.O. Hume claimed, that yes, these are actual spirits that they're speaking to. They're not shells. And it just says, I'm sorry to inform you, but you're mistaken. There is a second point. Very often, as I understand, the spirits of very fair, average, good people dying natural deaths remain some time in the Earth's atmosphere, from a few days to a few years. Why can't such as these communicate? And if they can, this is a most important point that should not have been overlooked.
He's funny.
He is funny and annoying.
The spirits of very fair, average, good people dying natural deaths remain in the Earth's atmosphere from a few days to a few years. The period depending on their readiness to meet their creature, not their creator. A very abstruse subject you will learn more about later on when you are more prepared.
And by creature, I assume it means your creations, the creations of your thoughts, your emotions, your actions.
But why should they communicate? Do those you love communicate objectively with you during their sleep?
Yeah, good question.
Your spirits in hours of danger or intense sympathy vibrating on the same current of thought, which in such cases creates a kind of telegraphic spiritual wire between your two bodies, may meet and mutually impress your memories, but then you are living, not dead bodies. But how can an unconscious fifth principle The fifth is the mental, right? The mental.
The higher mental, the way we normally express it.
But how can an unconscious fifth principle impress or communicate with a living organism unless it has already become a shell? If, for certain reasons, they remain in such a state of lethargy for several years, the spirits of the living may ascend to them, as you were already told. And this may take place still easier than in Devachan, where the spirit is much too engrossed in his personal bliss to pay much attention to an intruding element. I say they cannot.
And thirdly, it is a fact that thousands of spirits do appear in pure circles and teach the highest morality, and moreover, tell very closely the truths as to the unseen world. Witness Allan Kardec's books, pages upon pages of which are identical with what you yourself teach. And it is unreasonable to suppose that such are either shells or bad spirits. But you have not given us any opening for any large number of pure high spirits, and until the whole theory is properly set forth and due place made for these, which seem to me a well-established fact, you will never win over the spiritualists. I dare say it is the same old story, only part of the truth being told to us and the rest held back. If so, it is merely cutting the society's throat. Better to tell the outside world nothing than to tell them half-truths, the incompleteness of which they detect at once, and the result being a contemptuous rejection of what is truth, though they cannot accept it in this incomplete state. Yours affectionately, A.O. Hume.
Wow.
He's getting quite perturbed here, and then he signs it, yours affectionately.
Which teaches the highest morality. I hope I won't be called a slanderer in addition to other names lately bestowed upon me. But truth compels me to declare that Allan Kardec was not quite immaculate during his lifetime, nor has he become a very pure spirit since. As to teaching the highest morality, we have a Dugpa, not far from where I reside. But that's the red cap guy, right?
Mm-hmm. A lama.
Ooh, really? They're
Yeah.
considered well, I guess a lama could
some
be.
of them, they are either lamas or they're chelas of the Mahatma Chohans. The Mahatma Chohans are the Chohans of the dark side. They have their own Chohans.
Quite a remarkable man. he's being a little bit sarcastic.
This is kind of funny.
Not very powerful as a sorcerer, but excessively so as a drunkard, a thief, a liar, and an orator. Wow. So he is a spiritual teacher.
Well, yes.
In quotes.
On the dark side.
Right. But he's an orator.
They pretend to be, spiritual.
This lama, when thirsty, can make an enormous audience of yellow cap laymen, which are the good guys, right?
Yes.
Weep all their yearly supply of tears with the narrative of his repentance and suffering in the morning, and then get drunk in the evening and rob the whole village by mesmerizing them into a dead sleep. Preaching and teaching morality with an end in view proves very little. Wow.
He's referring again to Allan Kardec, who was a French spiritualist with a particular bent to his teaching. He actually believed in reincarnation, whereas most spiritualists were Christians. They believed that the dead person either went to heaven or to hell, and that they can communicate with them. And yet I've never seen anything very convincing of any real communication. Allan Kardec, on the other hand, was preaching, teaching that reincarnation does occur, but he also taught, like Anna Kingsford and some of the theosophists, incorrectly, that they reincarnate almost immediately, and not after this very long period that KH has said it takes, in general, to go through the Bardo process. In our next session, we're going to go over the letter that Sinnett wrote to HPB and get the answers to his questions. But in the meantime, we've already learned a lot. We are at the end of this first letter from A.O. Hume, and in our next session, we will take up the letter from Sinnett to HPB and also the answers to his questions. And until then, we will sign off and see you next time.
Thank you.
Thank you.